So in this video, I'm going to be going over how I lost 80 pounds in less than a year while eating Chick-fil-A every single week. And for reference, my starting point is 260 pounds, and I got all the way down to 180 pounds in the span of 11 months. So in order to follow this sustainable weight loss strategy, I first had to face reality, right? I had to determine where I was and where I needed to be and fill in those gaps. So where I was binge eating fast food multiple times a day. And I was stuck in an all or nothing mindset, which then kept me stuck in a cycle of starting next week every single week. And so my decisions were essentially controlled by cycles of binging and guilt. And I would always be rushing to start a new crash diet after every single time I would binge, which helped me. And I rushed to start a new crash diet after every single time I would binge, which then just caused me to continue gaining weight and ruining my health. And so, where I needed to be was I needed to consistently be losing weight and getting healthier, right? I was at 260 pounds, morbidly obese to start with. So, I needed to at least do something to move the needle in the right direction. So, that meant finding sustainable ways of eating to stay consistent for the long haul, right? I knew that I had a ton of weight to lose. It was going to take me a lot longer than somebody who, maybe only had 20 pounds to lose. And so that came with making gradual changes and increasing flexibility to prevent starting over every week and to get rid of my all or nothing mindset, right? So I had to develop adaptable habits that aligned with my goals, but also my schedule and my social life. So the first step after facing my reality was that I needed to meet myself where I was at. So first I found out what wasn't working, right? Crash diets were not working, and I knew that I needed to change my approach. So I also knew that cutting out fast food cold turkey was not going to be sustainable for my starting point, which was binge eating fast food multiple times a day, right? So I knew that if I just cut it cold turkey, that it would eventually just lead to another binge and it would eventually just continue the cycle, right? So I knew that I needed to cut down without feeling completely restricted and causing a binge to happen. So what I did was I created a more sustainable goal for myself, right? So I let myself eat fast food one time a week, and my favorite fast food was Chick-fil-A, so that's what I chose. Most of the time, decision for my health and for my goals, and I would be able to be in. So I found lower calorie, higher protein ways to still incorporate all of my favorite foods. So the turning Chick-fil-A that has mobile ordering and drive-through locations near my work, my school, and my home. So I could maintain my consistency without going out of my way to waste time, and I could just run through the drive-through wherever I was at in my day. And so Chick-fil-A also has a ton of high protein options, right? They offer high protein options that are both satisfying and also customizable, so you can make the decisions to support your individual weight loss goals. So my go-to orders, I have two go-to orders. My first one is the fresher option, right? So this is going to be a lower calorie, higher protein and fiber option that tasted good, but it also kept me full for hours. So all right, so my go-to orders, I have two options. My first option is a fresher option, right? So this is going to be a low calorie and protein and fiber packed option, which tasted really great, but then also kept me full for hours. So what I would get is I would get a grilled spicy Southwest salad, and then I would get it with the creamy salsa dressing. But the key to getting this dressing is that you can only use half a packet, right? The entire packet is 290 calories. And once you So what I would get is I would get a grilled spicy Southwest salad, and then I would get the dressing that it comes with, which is the creamy salsa dressing. But the key to using this dressing is that and honestly, the packet is very big, so you don't even need the entire thing. You're completely fine with just half. Once you try it and you realize, you'll, kind of come to the realization that you don't need the whole thing. So I also removed the tortilla strips and the pepitas, or like the nut kind of topping, because I personally did not feel like I needed those. And so I was willing to remove them in order to save about 200 calories. But if you're really dead set on having the toppings, it's really going to only add 200 or so calories, like 150 to 200 calories. If you're fine with that, go ahead and keep them on. But then I would also order a side of 8-count grilled nuggets just to increase the volume a bit and to increase the protein. And of course, every single order, I would also get a large Coke Zero. And so the nutrition on this meal is very low calorie and very high protein, considering this is from a fast food restaurant, right? So 515 calories for the entire order. And the protein is going to be 53 grams that have a high protein and high fiber amount so that you can stay fuller for longer. And then my second option is going to be the fried option because, sometimes a salad is not going to cut it, right? And as somebody who binge ate fast food multiple times a day, I completely understand just having that craving and wanting to satisfy it. What I would get is I would get an 8-count crispy nugget meal, and the side that I would get would be fries, medium fries, and a large Coke. And then again, I would get a side of 8-count grilled nuggets just to increase the volume a bit and again, increase the protein. And then for the sauces, one of the things that would always get me when I would get Chick-fil-A is the sauces. They are so high calorie. So it's really important to pay attention to your profile. It has the exact same flavor profile. It's just half the calories. A Chick-fil-A sauce is like 140 calories for a packet, but then the honey roasted barbecue is only like 60 calories for the packet. So essentially you're saving calories and it does have something fried in it. But relatively speaking for fast food, this is still pretty good when it comes to the calorie for this entire order is going to be 885, and then the protein is going to be 57 grams. The fat, obviously, it's a bit higher. You have something fried in there. It's going to be 52 grams, and then the carbs, 65, but there's still 5 grams of fiber. So obviously, I only listed my top 2 go-to options, but you can apply certain favorite options, right? But you can obviously apply this to more things. There are some decision. So obviously I only gave like my top 2 orders, but you can still apply some decision-making tools in order to make other smart choices at Chick-fil-A or at any other fast food restaurant. These would still apply. So obviously, if you choose grilled over fried, you're always going to save hundreds of calories per meal, and you're going to get that calorie to protein ratio, a lot higher. And so, and of course, you can be smarter with what sides you choose. So instead of choosing fries every time, sometimes you can choose a higher fiber, lower calorie side to increase your fullness and decrease the amount of empty calories. And same thing with the drinks, right? So 0-calorie drinks are always going to be a better option because there are no empty calories in them. And drinking liquid not only helps aid your digestion, but also helps keep you full as well. So in order to, for your weight loss goal, it is better to drink the 0-calorie version of any drink. And obviously we just went over the fast food orders, but what about the other 6 days of the week? So on the other 6 days of the week that I wasn't eating out, I maintained a calorie deficit that accounted for my weekly free meal, right? So how did I do this? I tracked my macros using a food scale and a tracking app. If you are not using a food scale and a tracking app, there is so much deficit, regardless of whether you're tracking based off of cups, tablespoons, or eyeballing, right? All of those measurements are extremely inaccurate. And really the only way for you to determine exactly whether you're in a deficit or not is if you are using a food scale paired with a tracking app. So my favorite tracking apps are FitnessPal and Chronometer. I feel like they're the easiest to use. And then a food scale, I just honestly got mine for about $20 at Target. You can also just get one really quick off, right? So say I was going to get my free meal on Saturday, I would subtract those macros from the Saturday macros. And if there was any macros that were left over and I needed to And if there was any remaining macros from that day, that I couldn't use on Saturday, and if there was any macros from the free meal that overshot one of the macros from that Saturday, I would then take those remaining macros and divide it across the remaining 6 days. And then I would subtract that number from each day. So say I went over by 21 grams of fat on Saturday, right? Like I accounted for the free meal on Saturday, but there was still 21 extra grams of fat. I would then take that 21 extra grams of fat, divide it across the 6 days, and then subtract that number, right? So then what I would do next is I would track my free meal into the calorie tracking app. A lot of fast food places already have their inputs in most of the calorie tracking apps, so it's really easy to just find what you need. And if not, there's a setting where you can go and create an item and you can just get the item's macros directly off of the nutrition facts from their website. So after I tracked my free meal, I would take all of those macros, the protein, the fats, and the carbs, and I would free meal on Saturday. I would subtract those macros from Saturday. So then if there was any leftover still, even after subtracting them from Saturday, like say I went over by 18 grams of fat after subtracting everything from Saturday, I would then take the remaining 18 grams of fat and I would divide it over the 6 remaining days, right? So 18 divided by 6, that would be 3. So that remaining number, I would then subtract that from all of the other 6 days. So all the other 6 days, I'd be subtracting 3 grams of fat to then still account for the free meal, right? And then I would do that for every single macro. And so that allowed me to not only fit in my free meal, but also just have a better idea of what I was actually eating and a better idea of, how much I was able to eat during the week in order to account for this free meal, right? So what I did was I focused on progress, not perfection. You're not going to be perfect every single time, and focusing on perfection gets you stuck in that all or nothing mindset. And so I was still able to incorporate the foods that I loved into my deficit while still losing weight consistently by creating these tangible goals. And what was really important for me was remembering that any deficit is still a deficit, right? Say if you went over your calories by 200, right? One of the days. If you were originally in a 500 calorie deficit per day and you went over that amount by 200, you're not ruining your deficit, because if you think about it, you're still in a 300 calorie deficit. So is it your 500 calorie deficit that you were aiming for? No. But is it still a 300 calorie deficit? Yes. So what's really important is that you're still having a net activity of moving the needle forward, right? It's not about being perfect. It's about the net activity and being perfectly fine. And so the results I got from actually doing this was I was able to lose 80 pounds in 11 months, and I didn't have to sacrifice the foods that I loved. And I learned what true moderation is. Before, when I was 260 pounds, I really thought that I was eating fast food in moderation, and I would always blame my binges on moderation, or I would justify them with balance, right? But doing this method, I actually learned what true moderation is, right? I was still doing things to meet my goals, but I didn't have to give up everything that I love. And so I also was able to remove the stress and the guesswork from, dieting, weight loss, by creating actual tangible goals that guaranteed my progress. If you track stuff out like this, you can guarantee yourself progress because those are tangible goals, right? Everybody is going to follow it. So if you calculate out a deficit and you track that deficit with a food scale and a tracking app to a T, you will lose weight. And so these tangible goals really helped me stop doing trial and error and guessing around and thinking that there was something wrong with me, right? It showed me that I can lose weight consistently if I follow a plan. And it also helped me to stop rebounding. And it also helped me develop sustainable dieting habits in order to help me keep the weight off for good. So I lost the 80 pounds, but I didn't rebound like I normally did, right? I used to always crash diet, lose a few pounds, rebound diet, and gain all of the weight back because it was just so unsustainable. But by doing this, I was able to continue this habit